Welcome to 24 Hours of Past, 20 Years of Past Learnings and Future Vision. We're excited you can join us today for Pam and Pedro's session, Modernizing SQL Server the Right Way. This 24 Hours of Past consists of 24 consecutive live webinars delivered by expert speakers from the past community. The session will be recorded and posted online after the event. You will receive an email letting you know when the recordings are available. My name is Eric Romero. I'm from Past HQ, and I have a few introductory slides before I hand over the reins to Pam and Pedro. If you require any technical assistance, please type your request into your question pane located on the right side of your screen, and someone will assist you. This question pane is also where you will ask questions throughout the presentation. Feel free to enter your questions at any time, and Pedro and Pam will address those questions to you. You're able to zoom in into the presentation content by using the zoom button located on the top of the presentation window. Please note that there will be a short evaluation at the end of the session, which will pop after the webinar in your web browser. Your feedback is really important to us for future events, so please take a moment to complete it. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Microsoft and Intel. The staging of 24 Hours of Past wouldn't be possible without their generous support, and they are the reason why this event is available for free of charge. Microsoft SQL Server is a business analytics and data management platform. It's secure, easy to manage, and gives our customers peace of mind and confidence in the security of their data. SQL Server combines scalable performance with end-to-end business intelligence and built-in analytics solution. It can be used on premises, in the cloud, or in hybrid environments. Intel expands the boundaries of technology to make the most amazing experience possible. Information about Intel and the work of its more than 100,000 employees can be found at newsroom.intel.com and intel.com. If you would like to learn more about our Microsoft or Intel, sign up for information on how they can help you, and please visit our sponsored page at the 24 Hours of Past website. Keep learning your long. Visit past.org and check out all the free educational resources available to past members. Connect, share, and learn. Also, don't forget that Past Summit 2019 will be happening on November 5th in Seattle, Washington. Head over to pastsummit.com and register today. This 24 Hours of Past session is presented by Pam and Pedro Lopes. Pam has been with Microsoft for over 13 years and is currently a senior program manager in the database system group working in the storage engine area. She's passionate about SQL Server performance and has focused on performance tuning and optimization, particularly from the developer perspective throughout her career. She's in SQL 28 MCM with over 20 years experience working with SQL Server. Pedro is a senior program manager in the database systems group with focus on SQL Server's relational engine and programmability space. He has extensive background in performance tuning and optimization and also connects closely with several high-profile SQL Server customers and partners in the field to understand more about product usage and gather feedback that drives improvement back into the product. And without further ado, here's Pam and Pedro with Modernizing SQL Server the Right Way.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks, Eric. All right, so what we're here to talk about is modernizing SQL Server, either modernizing on-prem or even some of the tools that we're going to talk about today can also get you into the cloud. So where we're going to start is why should you be upgrading? So the reason why we're here talking to you today, among other things, is because we are approaching SQL Server 2008 end of support. So if you don't know this date, July 9th, 2019 is the end of support for SQL Server 2008. And we know that many of you are still running SQL Server 2008 and SQL Server 2008 R2. So if you haven't started planning your modernization from these versions of SQL Server, now is really the time to get started. So there are a lot of questions that you might be asking yourself, is it really the right time to modernize? And so the first thing is, do I need to modernize to reduce costs? Moving to new hardware, new versions of SQL Server can actually help you reduce costs because new efficiencies the performance of your servers might be better. And also, just being able to leverage a lot of these new features gives you the ability to get better value for your money if you were to modernize both the platform and your application. Also, to maintain compliance. So as we just mentioned, SQL Server 2008 is going out of support. So do you need to maintain compliance with both Microsoft, but also are there features that you may need to leverage to help maintain compliance for your application? New security features, for example, new auditing features, things that would allow you to maintain compliance in your application, but also to maintain compliance with your vendors with support. So to keep vendor support both from Microsoft and from any third-party vendors that you may be engaging with. Maybe you have new vendor applications that will only support newer versions. So do you need to modernize to keep that vendor support? For ISVs, software vendors, are your customers wanting to modernize? So it's possible that your customers are ready to go to new versions of the platform and they need your application to come with them. So do you need to, as an ISV, do you need to modernize to allow your customers to move forward as well and to enable choice and additional features for them? So modernizing to the latest version of SQL Server allows you to change your applications and take advantage of these new modern features and give your customers better performance and reliability. And so the last topic that you might be saying to yourself is, this is a big risk for me to modernize both the platform and the application. So is there any way that I can separate the modernization cycle of the application from the modernization cycle of the data platform itself? And so in the next section, that's what we want to talk to you about, is a methodology for you to be able to decouple the modernization of an application from the data platform in order to reduce risk and also to streamline that modernization process.
Yeah, so one part of doing that and trying to reduce the risk and trying to manage the risk that always exists in any modernization effort is something that actually comes all the way back from early releases of SQL Server, which is the notion of maintaining database compatibility between versions. Now, we are working on this actively with a number of ISVs, even internal teams, to actually shift towards a mindset where we certify new applications and new platforms based on database compat level. So here are the two calls to action, if you will. One is, please stop certifying on a given platform. Now, we have exactly the same database engine code running both on Azure SQL Database, including managed instance, and on SQL Server. And this has been 100% true at least since SQL 2016, which means that when you modernize to a new version of any database, of our database engine, that means that you can go to the cloud, you can stay on premises, but your code, in what relates to your T-SQL running on the database engine, that runs exactly the same. Now, that proposes another thought. So why would you certify based on a named SQL Server version? Instead, we ask you to stop certifying on a named SQL Server. Maybe you had an application that was certified on SQL Server 2008. Well, intrinsically, what happened is you certified that application on DB Compat 100, because that's a matching DB Compat for SQL 2008, given that we're talking about end of support here. Now, that means that because we have DB Compat 100 in every version that came after it, you can actually move to SQL Server 2017, to 2019, or even to Azure SQL Database, and while maintaining the same DB Compat, in this case 100, your application code runs the same. Now, so this means that any certification process, especially the ones that are new, that you are looking at now to recertify an older application that you have, or you have a new project. If you are an ISV and you need to certify that application on the database platform, please think about which target database compat level are you certifying to, rather than a named SQL Server version or a platform. And we are actually backing this up with tangible and official documentation. If you go to this short URL you see on the screen here, you will see that we have extensively changed the documentation regarding this DB Compat level and how it can actually be a useful tool for you to leverage and reduce risk and be more flexible when tackling your application certification. And there are three key benefits I would like to call out here. First of all is it gets simpler. It gets simpler to certify an application. If you know the code, the database engine on which it runs, it's literally the same between on-premises and Azure, which means that maybe now you're actively working on certifying your application using the SQL Server 2017 bits, and those map to maybe DB Compat level 140. Now, that same DB Compat 140 runs exactly the same on Azure SQL Database Managed Instance, for example. So you will allow your customers and yourself the flexibility of moving to different platforms as long as that single common point, which is the DB Compat level, remains the same. So this allows you to provide your customers, or you yourself as the consumer and builder of the application, to have a choice of to go to whichever platform makes sense during your business cycle, because you know that the persistent point that drove all your certification was the DB Compat level, and that same one is present across platforms, and therefore you can leverage and remain the same in terms of functionality. And this also allows you to improve risk management, because you're able to decouple the upgrade risk that Pam mentioned a few minutes ago. Think about you having to upgrade a large platform that has a complex application ecosystem that sits on top of a very large database or databases, plural. And think about one migration project where everything needs to migrate at once in the same time window. That is not only a huge amount of work, but it's also a huge amount of risk that you have, because every single moving part of this migration cannot be completely tested, for example, and therefore you increase risk and you have more unknowns. Now think about this DB Compat based certification. Let's go back to a database that was certified on SQL 2008. I can move that database to SQL 2017 or Azure SQL Managed Instance, and I will keep the same DB Compat level. Now, from a functionality perspective, if nothing has changed, that means that I can point my old application that's still working to this new platform that is still running on the source DB Compat level. And if I find any functional issues, if I find any issue of any sort, the only moving part that happened so far was the database. So I can tackle that with the database vendor. I can tackle that at the database level. Once that is tested and it's already stable, then I can think about in a different time moving the application on top. And then again, if anything that escaped my testing comes to pass when you actually migrate the application, then you know where you should be looking at. You need to look at the application layer rather than the database for the most part. So this really allows you to improve risk management. But we as Microsoft, we stand by this notion of certifying based on DB Compat. And this revolves all around the notion of DB Compat providing you protection. Now, this protection can be a loaded term. So let's try to debug that a little bit. Now, we will stand by that protection, meaning we will tell you that, yes, your workload will function the same, because we have assessment tools that if they run clean, they don't output any blocking issues that may prevent you from moving to a newer version. If you have a clean bill of health, if you will, then you have full functional protection that whatever worked back in SQL 2008 or 2008 R2 will work exactly the same in a newer version of SQL. And when I say SQL, I always mean obviously Azure SQL Database, because it's the same engine. Now, another important part is query plan shape. Now, one of the risks that comes along with moving to a higher version of SQL Server, namely to move to a new DB Compat level, is that query plans may change. And when a query plan changes, this means that performance may be different than you were expected. So it's super important for you to rest assured that the query plan shape will be protected if you keep the same DB Compat as it did in the source. And this is all because of this last pillar here. It's the unsung hero of SQL Server, the undocumented feature. This is because maintaining backwards compat is at the very core of everything we do in the SQL Server team. We always do regression testing. We always look at ways of enabling new features without breaking existing workloads. And if you think about it, this is the only way that can be done, especially when you move to the cloud business. If you think about a model where you are in the cloud using Azure SQL Database, and we take care of the upgrades, we take care of patching and always moving along the database version, we can't break your workloads that are running there. So this became a fundamental part of our DNA some time ago. Now, there's a number of things, just for reference here. Look at this table from bottom up. So the database compat level, what it does is it sets behaviors at the database level, and behaviors that map that specified SQL Server version. So for example, SQL Server 2008, the highest compat level back then was 100. And that's because technically SQL Server 2008 is version 10 of SQL Server. Now, if you move all the way up to Azure SQL Database, while the default compat level is 130 or 140, depending on where you stand right now, you see that you have available all the way back from 100 and all the way up to 150, which is the default for SQL Server 2019. So you see that it is flexible from a behavioral perspective to move between these versions as long as you keep that fundamental anchor, which is your DB compat level. And the compat level, by the way, just adding this, only works for the specified database, not for the entire server. So for example, if you have a consolidated SQL Server that you have different databases from different applications there, and they were all perhaps certified on different named versions back then, you can set specific DB compat levels and they work and they will impact the behavior on that database alone. Now, there are a few questions that need to be clarified, because you have heard me in the last few minutes and you were probably thinking, yeah, but am I really ready to move to a newer version? Will I be completely free of any issue? Well, that's where our tools come in. But before we introduce the tools, I want to clarify a few concepts. Now, we do have the concept of deprecating a feature in SQL Server. And as much as we have not deprecated features since 2016 at least, we historically, as the versions move along, and especially if you're coming from such an old version as 2008, then this is something you need to take care of. Now, deprecated means that you just need to avoid its use in new development work. This means that a functionality or feature was introduced in a version. It still works in the current version. It's protected by DB Compat, meaning that if we are using the source DB Compat, that feature or functionality will work as it would in a source SQL Server. But because it may be removed in a future version, in any new work at least, please avoid using that. That is different from discontinued. Discontinued actually means removed from the product. So therefore, if it is actually being removed from the product at a certain point, and I have one example that I will give you in a couple minutes, then that's actually not protected by DB Compat. No matter which DB Compat you move to, or if you remain on the same one as your source SQL Server, you will not have that functionality in. And this is one example. The fast first row hint was removed back in SQL Server 2012. Now imagine that you're coming from SQL 2008 and you have that hint working in your code. We have tools that will allow you to uncover these, but you will need to go in and fix something. For example, this query that you see on the screen here, regardless of compat mode, if it's running on any version after SQL 2012, then it won't work. You'll get error 321. So you'll instead need to refactor the query to work with this hint, fast equals integer. And this is a direct replacement for a discontinued syntax. And this is something you will need to take care of before you move to a higher version. Now, there's also the concept of a breaking change. And the breaking, and by the way, these are all documented. Once we release a new version, we have a list of what was discontinued, what remains deprecated, and even a list of breaking changes between versions, if there are any. And breaking changes means that behaviors may change when you run the exact same code in different versions of SQL Server. So for example, think about this piece of code here. In DB Compat 120 or lower, look at the result for that cast operation. You see the precision of the time there. Now, starting with SQL 2016, we have changed the precision of date time to, we've changed the precision of float and a number of other data types. So you see that the same operation actually results in a different output. You see the added precision there. Now, this is actually protected by DB Compat. So if you need the first result, if you account for that in your logic, then you need to remain at a lower compat level. This, however, is an example of something that is not protected by DB Compat. What you see in the first query there is something that worked back in DB Compat 90, so back in SQL 2005. But once you move from SQL 2005 to any newer version, that code can no longer work and the conversion will fail. So instead, you need to use one of the two options that you see below. So these are just a few examples of something that you need to take care of, but we have tools that will help you deal with this, and those will be introduced later in this session. Now, we need to talk about the upgrade process itself.
Yes, so I will take over there and talk a little bit about how you can implement some of the things that Pedro talked about by using these tools that he mentioned. So the first thing I want to talk about is the process that you should be using for planning your database migration strategy. And so what we have here is something called the Database Migration Guide, which is published on links. We'll have links for you later in the deck. And this is a way for you to plan out your migration strategy from beginning to end in a way that will help you minimize risk. One of the reasons why people tend to not migrate is, one thing, of course, is if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? Because if everything's working great, why introduce the risk of modernizing the platform when things are just working fine? And so we've told you earlier in the first slide, there's a lot of reasons why you might want to migrate, but we can help you reduce the risk to make that a little bit easier and a little bit more streamlined by following this process. And so when people think about doing an upgrade or a migration, a lot of people are focusing on can I point with this?
Yes.
Sorry. There we go. Yeah. So a lot of people are focusing on this part over here, the data sync and the cutover. So they might be thinking, okay, how am I going to get to this new platform? I'm going to install this new server, and then I don't know, I'm going to enable an availability group, or I'm going to turn on replication, or I'm going to do log shipping. So they're really focusing their planning over here on the actual data sync and the cutover. And they're not spending as much time on the left side of this diagram here, which is where you really should be spending the bulk of your time when you're planning your migration. Discover, assess, convert. So what we want you to do is attack this process with the same kind of design and planning as you would releasing a new software product. We want you to, assess what you've got going on in the environment. Take a look at, which versions of SQL Server you have, those kinds of things. Which features are you using? And then spend a lot of time actually running through our assessment tools, planning, testing, and making sure that you identify any potential issues before you get to that data sync and cutover. So spending more of your time in the planning and testing and assessment phase will allow you to do that cutover much more seamlessly. And so what we want to go through in the next section is a series of tools that you can download that are free from Microsoft that will help you get through this migration with minimal risk. So the first thing, so the first tool we're going to talk about is the MAP Toolkit. So this would be used for the assessment phase. The next is the Database Migration Assistant, which is one of the tools that Pedro was referencing that can help you find things like deprecated and discontinued features. And then we will talk about the database experimentation assistant, which can help you do some testing between old version and new version, help you identify performance issues and things like that. And then towards the end, we will also talk about a tool that you can use post-migration to help mitigate any issues. So these are the main tools, and as I said, they are in the database migration guide. There's a whole process that's listed out for you there, and we'll cover these here. And we do have customers who have used these tools and have gone through this process and can attest to the time and effort that it saved them, and the ability to minimize risk and to be able to upgrade with high confidence, to say, I'm confident that this migration is going to work because I've done all this testing, I've run all these tools, and everything looks good, and they're able to seamlessly migrate to modern versions of SQL Server. So the first phase would be the discover phase. And the discover phase, you would use the MAP Toolkit. Now, if you're only upgrading like a single SQL server or a single server, you may not need to use the MAP Toolkit. But what this is designed for is folks who have very large environments, large data estates, where they may not even know how many SQL servers they have. They may not know which versions. They may not know what's even installed. Do I have reporting services? Do I have integration services? What's even running on these machines? How many cores do I have? How many databases do I have? What are the sizes? What are the settings? So it's a way to do an inventory of the environment and just kind of get an idea of the scope of your migration. So the MAP Toolkit can be used to do that in the discover phase. So that's step one. Next, we would move on to assess and convert. So for the assessment phase, we focus on the data migration assistant. So the data migration assistant is a way to assess your database code to look for breaking changes, behavior changes, and deprecated features. These are the things that Pedro was talking about when he was talking about DB Compat. So in order to be able to provide you that DB Compat protection, you need to come through this data migration assistant clean with no errors. So if you do the assessment and you identify any of these breaking changes or deprecated features and things, you would need to mitigate these issues in order to proceed with your migration and then have that DB Compat protection. The data migration assistant will also allow you to discover new features. So you may not know some of the features in these newer versions of SQL Server that you could benefit from. So the DMA will help you identify. We've analyzed your workload, and now we've seen that you might actually benefit from these newer features, and they may help you improve performance or improve security of your application. So this will allow you to be able to more fully leverage the new platform that you're moving to by identifying new features. And then the data migration assistant also does have the ability to perform the migration for you if you choose. So it can connect to the source and target servers, allows you to choose the databases, and then it can actually do the migration for you. You can use the tool to monitor it, and then it can provide you a final report. So you may or may not actually use this to do the conversion. I think most people will use this assessment phase, and then they'll probably plan something else for the actual cutover. But maybe during your testing phase, if you want to use this to migrate to a test system, then that would allow you to quickly and easily do that using this tool. So again, database migration assistant allows you to identify potential pitfalls, and we do have the ability to automate some of this remediation. So it's a way that you can quickly and easily identify issues and then remediate any issues prior to your migration. So the next phase would be test and optimize. And so again, you notice this is the biggest piece of the diagram. This is where you should really be spending your time, is going through functional and performance testing, making sure everything is optimized, addressing any of those breaking or deprecated features, breaking changes, behavior changes, doing all that, and then cycling again. So test, fix, test, fix. So one of the tools that you can use to help with this piece of the process is called the Database Experimentation Assistant. And the database experimentation assistant allows you to do A/B testing. So to have a workload that you run on the old version of SQL Server, run that same workload on the newer version, and then do some comparison. So this can do hardware comparison, workload comparison. It can identify degraded queries. It can also identify queries that are performing better. And it can help you just see how this application might behave when you get to the new version of SQL Server. So along with the assessment that identifies breaking and behavior changes, the experimentation assistant can help you identify things like query shape changes or other performance changes that might occur in the new version, both positive and negative. So database experimentation assistant, again, and this also, I should mention, it also does have the ability to identify some regressions and breaking changes, similar to the advice that you can get from the migration assistant. So it also has some of an assessment piece as well, but also this can be automated. So if you've got a lot of databases that you need to test and verify, you can automate this process and then get the reporting out of the database experimentation system and be able to kind of migrate your whole estate with this.
So while we'll not be doing full-fledged demos of these two tools, we do, however, want to show you a quick walkthrough of the I would say the pivotal points in time in this application that really shine and give you information that you can use. So one thing that I want to announce here, and I actually have done this very recently, is that we will be able to assess ad hoc workloads in Database Migration Assistant, whereas in the currently public version, you can assess only the schema. So one of the things that you can do is you open the Data Migration Assistant, and what it is, it's a project-based approach. So you open something, you open the new project in the assessment mode. And notice here, let me try to bump this up a little bit. Notice here that I've opened this and I named this Inventory Assessment 1. Now, the first thing I have to do is I'll have to select my target version. So the target for my migration in this case will be SQL Server 2017. And added to that, I want to find not only compatibility issues, like, for example, discovering breaking changes and behavior changes, and to a lesser degree, deprecated features, although these specifically will not preclude me from upgrading. But I actually want to add here the ability to find new SQL Server features that may be applicable to my database. For example, do I have candidates for using a column store or in-memory LTP? So since I'm doing this assessment, let's also bring this into the mix. And so I select my version. I will click on Next, and that moves me to the connection. And here I will connect to my source server, and my source being a SQL Server 2008 R2 instance. So I just connect there. And once I do, I run through the assessment, and this may take some time, which is why this is not a demo. And once you are done with the assessment, then you get a screen that looks like this. Now let's look at what kind of information we have here. So this was an assessment made on SQL Server 2008 R2 that was running actually in Compat mode 80, and the target is SQL Server 2017. And notice here that I have one tab per each DB Compat level, one per each supported Compat level in 2017. So it comes from all the way back from DB Compat 100, which is the minimum that we support, all the way up to 140. And now this is important because this is where you will map to the concept that I was mentioning earlier around DB Compat based certification. And notice here that if I choose to move that database to SQL 2017 and keep DB Compat 100, I still have 10 issues that I need to take care of. And as I progress through the DB Compats all the way up to 140, which is the latest in 2017, I have a total of 14 issues that I need to take care of. Now, those are divided into categories. And let me zoom in again. And the categories are breaking changes. So these definitely I need to take care of. They can be just an FYI. or they can mean something that will functionally break my application. And these mean that it's commands that can still be, in some cases, executed, but the scope of that command or the type of output of that T-SQL language has changed. So I need to take care of those. But I also have behavior changes. So these are some, while the first ones are certainly some things you need to take care of because they will not allow your code to work, these actually may allow your code to work, but they may introduce different behaviors, as the name suggests. So you need to take care of these. And these deprecated features, these are more in the scope of our migration here, of our upgrade. These are more for informational purposes only, but do keep in mind that you have 4 instances of using deprecated data types. So at least in a new version of the application, as you modernize your database, you may want to revisit these in a future iteration and remove them. So let's go to the breaking changes. And if I click in this category here, discontinued DBCC commands, I see exactly what the issue is. I see the recommendations of how to rewrite, how to address that issue, and more information pointing to the documentation. I also have exactly which objects are impacted. And I know within each object, for example, in this store procedure, which line and column are referencing in this case, the command that no longer works, so discontinued DBCC command. So while this right now works as, sorry about that glitch.
We fixed the glitch.
But we're back. So as I was saying, this will allow you to assess the schema of your database, and pretty soon you'll be able to also assess the ad hoc workloads that you're running. Okay, I'm having a few issues with the Zoom here. Okay, so the next tool is that we already talked about in the last few minutes is the Database Experimentation Assistant. Now, again, I'm not going to run through the entire tool, but just to give you a quick walkthrough of how it works. It works by capturing a workload and then being able to replay that workload against 2 targets. Now, we're talking about upgrades here from an older version to a newer version. So consider target 1, as you see on the screen there, as your SQL 2008, and target 2 will be my SQL Server 2017. And then what it does is it will replay those data collections against both targets, and then it will output a report that you'll be able to navigate and discover a whole number of potential issues that may be plaguing your workloads. So the first thing I need to do is I need to connect to a server. And this is already after I've run through the data collection and the replay. In an older version of the Database Experimentation Assistant, we used to collect SQL traces and replay with distributed replay. The latest versions of DEA, so Database Experimentation Assistant, do collect extended events, and they replay using, we don't use distributed replay anymore, we use OSTRES. So it's more scalable and less cumbersome to set up. Now, once I connect to the server that has my reports, I'm presented with this. So what I have here is actually a migration that I've run before, or a assessment I've run before, where my source is a 2008, and my destination will be a SQL 2016 instance. And I can see here immediately from a performance perspective, remember this is an A/B testing tool primarily, I see that 70% of my workload, this is by execution count, actually improved just by changing to the new version. Now, I do also see that almost 28% degraded, so I can actually double click on these links and go to a lot more detail on this. And I can see issues by category. So I can see issues that are, for example, upgrade blockers, which is obviously what I want to take care of. So if I click on my upgrade blocker category, and then I will go to a sub-report that gives me a lot of detail. And on this, what I have here is, okay, I executed a number of queries that resulted in upgrade blockers. In this case, I see here 10 queries that were overall executed 3,500 times. And if I go further down, I can see exactly what those queries were. So what I can see here is these are part of an ad hoc workload. So even right now, even without a new version of DMA, you are able to use DMA to assess the schema and any store procedures, functions, and views and whatnot that you have there. But you can also use DEA not only for A/B comparison, but also to uncover upgrade blockers in your ad hoc workload. So see here that this query, for example, is yielded an error of incorrect syntax near the keyword compute. Notice here that I'm using the keyword compute here. This specific form of user compute is no longer valid in newer versions of SQL Server, so a workaround is required. And the documentation, if I click here, I'll actually be able to see what workarounds are possible for me to go and rewrite this query for it to work on the newer version of SQL Server. Now, the next stage is you've cut off. You perform the data sync. You are ready to bring your new system online and connect your applications there. And so a question remains. If I move the data, am I done here? Now, I would submit that you're not done, especially because at this point, everything that may have not been tackled during all your tests, no matter how much, how comprehensive they were, we all know that once you move to production, something that may go wrong. Maybe something that's not actually a big thing, but you need to know them to be able to fix them. So it's important to uncover any issues, especially performance issues, that may arise once you actually move a production workload to your new server. So for that, we actually have a recommended upgrade plan for you to move from your source DB Compat level to the newer Compat level, obviously once you're ready to do that. So the first thing you need to do is, okay, you have upgraded to the latest SQL Server, your database is working, and it's working with the source DB Compat level. That's the whole gist of you having certified on a specific DB Compat level, because you know the application works with that DB Compat level. So that's the one you run with. Now, if your goal is to upgrade, that's all fine. Maybe you have new features that are only unlocked by new DB Compat levels, and you want to leverage those. Now, the first thing you need to do is you'll need to enable query store. After that, you will need to wait to collect your data. Now, this means that you're creating a baseline, and a baseline that lasts as long as your business cycles do. So it may be 1 day, 1 week, whatever is the business cycle that you need to take care of. And then once you know that you have a good baseline collected in query store, then you will bump up DB Compat to the latest or your target DB Compat. And at that point, if any performance regressions come in, you'll be able to quickly fix them by just forcing that last known good state that you know you have because you created this baseline. Now, there are a couple of ways of going about this. In SQL Server 2016, when Query Store was introduced, you had a report called regress. You still have that, by the way, but it's called regress queries. So once you bump up DB Compat, you can start coming into this report and seeing if any query regressed. If it did, because you have that previous point in time where the plan was good, you can simply, with one click, force that plan to be persistent, and there you go. You fixed your performance issue. Now, in SQL 2017 or above, you actually have something called automatic plan correction, which is enabled by the feature auto-tuning. That means that this manual action that I just mentioned in 2016 is fully automated in 2017 in the scope of this upgrade, because I have that baseline, that known last good point in time where it worked. So if SQL Server detects a regression, it will just go back there. Now, there are other ways of doing this. Now, we have introduced in one of the latest preview versions of SQL Server Management Studio something we call the Query Tuning Assistant. And its first priority is to guide you through this documented and recommended upgrade procedure, and do it so without a lot of friction. So you see the documented upgrade procedure in the bottom there. That's the one you saw in the last slide. However, Query Tuning Assistant has one difference. instead of going back to a previously known good point in time, it can actually recommend you to go to a new, better plan that's better than the one that existed in your baseline, better than the one that existed, obviously, after a regression was encountered. And it's something that it will work going forward. So how does the query tuning assistant work in terms of workflow? So it does depend on query store, and it does depend on query store being able to track those regress queries. So therefore, you need to follow that process that's documented and recommended, that will guide you through it. Now, as we analyze your workload as it's being collected by query store, we know by years of working with customers that have moved from older versions of SQL Server to newer versions of SQL Server that there are more, let's say, known caveats, more known pitfalls of workloads that migrate from older versions to newer versions. And it so happens that we have knobs, tweaks, if you will. In this case, there are hints that can actually address those contention points. And with that, they're able to actually mitigate those in a way that it's not dependent on which version that you're running. So we'll go through all these caveats, if you will. And if none of those work as a last resort, yes, we'll still try on the previous cardinality estimation model. But the point is, on the other side, you'll come out of the tool by deploying plan guides with actually from queries that work and have been tested, and actually will provide you a better way out for your performance issues. Now, I want to do a quick demo of this one. Let me move my VM here.
Did it disconnect during the glitch?
It did. It did disconnect during the glitch. This is why it's taking a bit longer.
Yeah, sorry, folks. We didn't completely fix the glitch, I guess.
I guess not. I guess not. But the demo is ready to go. So as soon as it logs in,
there we go.
I'll be able to show it. So what we'll see here is I moved a database from SQL 2012 to SQL Server 2017. And as soon as it comes up, what you'll see is that I've attached that database, or I could have backed up in the source system and restored in the destination. And once I do that, I will verify that the database actually remained in the same DB Compat level as its source. And I do apologize, it's taking a little bit longer than I anticipated to actually log into this. Once I do that, that means that I'm at the point where I just did the cutoff. I just made my database work and my application work with the current version of the database system. Okay, here we go. So here's my SQL Server 2017, and here's my AdventureWorks DW 2012. Now, as I mentioned a second ago, if I go to properties, I'll be able to quickly check that in terms of DB Compat level, it's in the source Compat level of SQL 2012. Okay, so I know this database functionally, everything that runs here will run as it did back in SQL Server 2012, because in the process of migrating the database here, I have uncovered all the breaking changes and discontinued features, so I know the code works. Now, what I need to do first is I want to start upgrading the database, right? So another issue here. Apparently, I wasn't connected to the right power source, and I'm going to do that now. So we should be able to be okay. There we go. Good. So as I was saying, the first thing we need to do is I want to run through that process, that documented process. So I will right-click the database. Let me zoom in here. And I will go to tasks, and I'll go all the way down to database upgrade. This is what I want to do. I want to upgrade the DB Compat level to the latest available. So I will start a new database upgrade session. And here's what it tells me. Okay, first thing you need to do to set up is to configure query store. because query store is at the heart of this feature. Okay, so a couple of things I need to configure here. One, what is the expected workload duration? So basically, this is asking me, what is your business cycle? Let's say my workload repeats every 3 days, so I get my full-fledged, my full workload to run within the scope of 3 days, so this is what I want to collect. What is your target DB Compat level? Now, I am on SQL 2017, which means apart from 110, which is the source database here, the source DB Compat level, I have all these to choose from. I want to go to the latest in this case, so I'll select 140. And then I will click on Next. What it asks me next is to configure Query Store. Because look, I had Query Store turned off, and I need it to be turned on. So I can either use my recommended settings, or I can come here, select Current, and edit the settings I want to edit. Now, I'm actually going to go with the recommended, and I'm going to click Next. And it tells me, okay, you are now ready to begin collecting your workload. And please do note that Query Tuning Assistant will not execute any workload, so you need to know how to do that yourself. Either you are in a test system where you know you can run your test workloads, or this is production, in which case we are already running our workload. Okay, so I'll finish. And as I do this, I'm going to start running my pre-upgrade workload, meaning this is my baseline workload. So I'll leave it running here. In the meantime, let's say this is production, the workload is running. I come here to my AdventureWorks. I go again to tasks. I go again to database upgrade. And here, I'm going to now choose monitor sessions. Once I do that, this window comes up. And it shows me here that I have my ongoing upgrade session here. So I can click on details. I'll get into it. And it greets me saying, hey, if you've not started already, now start executing your representative workload cycle. And I've done that, or at least it's doing that right now. So I know that the workload is running. At any point in time, I don't need to wait the 3 days. I can come here and resume the process earlier than those 3 days. In this case, I will actually wait for the workload to complete, because I want to make sure that I have a full baseline on which I can then iterate and analyze and really come up with tangible, good recommendations for my workload. Okay, so imagine that these few seconds that we've wasted here are days, these 3 days that I was running my workload. Once I'm done, I come here, I click on I'm done with my workload run, and I will click on Next. And what we've done here is we've just gone through the first 3 boxes of that documented process. We've attached a database, we've enabled Query Store, and we've collected the baseline. And now we're ready to upgrade DB Compat to the target level that we've chosen. And in this case, I'll click yes. And it will tell me, okay, you've successfully upgraded your DB Compat level. Perfect. Now what? I'll click next to go to the next stage. And what it tells me is, okay, now that you've upgraded to the desired Compat level, if you're not running already, rerun the same workload as you did before. In this case, up to those 3 days. And now I'll be able to compare my baseline against my post-DB Compat upgrade workload. So I'll do just that. I'll kick off the post-upgrade workload, which is the same. And by the way, these demos are in our GitHub, and we'll provide you the link. But if you want to go to aka.ms/Tiger Toolbox, you'll be able to go to sessions, and you'll find the demo there. Now, this workload will be running, and as it is running, I can actually close SSMS and go home, because this process will take a few days. Whenever I'm ready or whenever I want to check up on this, I just come back, I click on Monitor Sessions, it opens up, I can refresh, and I'll start seeing information here. Look, a number of queries have executed a number of times, and I have already here some preliminary data on my baseline metric, observed metric, and the % changes that I'm observing right now. So until the workload is complete, or until I'm satisfied that I have my my post-upgrade collection done, I can keep iterating on this screen. And once I'm ready, I will again click on Done with Workload Run to move to the analysis phase. Now, while I'm here, I can do a number of things. I can select which queries to show. The default is top top 20, but I can select top 25, for example, or I can select another metric and so on and so forth. Once I'm ready to move forward, I'll be done with workload run, click next, and I enter the analysis phase. Now I've chosen top 25 regressed queries. So I have here a number of queries that I've executed 300 times, as I see here. And I see the baseline metric, so the pre-upgrade versus the post-upgrade. And I actually see that a number of them regressed after the upgrade, right? So these are the ones that I really want to take care of. In this case, I'm being kind of lazy. I'll select just everything, but I could be very careful and select only the ones that I see have regressed, as I should. But I'm doing this on purpose, and I'll tell you why in the end. So once I've selected the queries that I want to tune, I'll click next. And it tells me, hey, if you go to the analysis phase, until it's done, you won't be able to return to this page. Are you sure? Well, yes, that's what I want to do. So let's go forward. And I'll be able to check the status of that analysis while it runs. And eventually, it will come to a point where, as you see here, the test is complete. Now, once the test is complete, I again am greeted with metrics. I see that, for example, at my baseline, so before the upgrade, this query ran in 2.46 seconds. After this query, sorry, these are milliseconds. And after this exercise of analyzing which way I could tune this query, I actually ran it, and now it ran in less than 1 millisecond, which is why it's rounded down to a 0. So I've actually got 100% improvement on this query. But I have other ones. This one improved almost 60%, almost 45%, and so on and so forth. So overall, I do get good improvements from running this tool. Now, you want to maybe you're asking, okay, but what it's actually doing? So what it's doing is it will take these queries, because they're all selects. Only selects are being handled by this tool at this point. We'll run them. We'll actually collect runtime metrics, and then we'll be able to actually give you tangible, observed metrics, as you see here. Now, if you want to know what we'll be implementing, that's easy. You can click on a link, and the link opens a browser window. And that browser window, for example, let me choose this one, the first one, for example. It will go to the docs page precisely on the hint that we'll be using to then improve the performance of this query specifically. So I can select only a few. In this case, I'll select all of them, and I will deploy a plan guide that includes these hints to make sure that these queries now run with this fine tuning here. And I see the status change to deployed. Now, I actually went back and say, oh, hang on, this query actually got worse by almost 1,800%. So I shouldn't have actually deployed this. Or maybe after I deploy this, even though in our tests it yielded much better results, I find that because my stats may have changed or some other aspect, the query is now performing worse, and I want to remove the plan guide. One way of doing it is to select the query that I want to remove the plan guide for, click rollback, and that's it. The query goes back to being recompiled, and we no longer have a plan guide. And with this, I've successfully upgraded my DB Compat, and I'm able not only to handle the regressions, but to actually find a third moment in time where all these queries that had regressed are actually performing much better. So you may ask here at this point, we have a number of tools already in our tool belt. You showed us DEA, you showed us DMA, and now you showed us QTA. Those are all acronyms. There are too many tools. Well, just to give you a quick breakdown of what these are. So what DMA does is readiness assessment. It will uncover blocking issues, breaking changes, behavior changes, anything that you need to take care of before you upgrade, because those will prevent you from having a successful upgrade. Now, DEA is for A/B testing primarily. Yes, you can use it to uncover also some blocking issues for ad hoc workload, but it's primarily for you to prove that overall your workload will behave better just by moving to a new version, and we've seen that in the report. QTA, this last one, Query Tuning Assistant, is specifically targeted to help you and to guide you through the recommended method of upgrading DB Compat, because only when you do this you are in charge of the risk. Only when you do this, you can get ahead of any potential performance issues that may come, even in spite of all the testing that you've done. So I've run through the demo already, obviously. I want to just go through some quick takeaways. The first thing I want to call out is, please start planning for end of service. Please start planning with that July 1st date in mind. SQL Server 2008 and 2008 R2 will be out of support, which means that it's been 10 years already.
Yes, and we also want you to review the database migration guide. So again, we'll have some links that are part of the slide deck. So you'll be able to download the deck and get those links. So that includes the database migration guide. And this has step-by-step all the things that you need to do to download the tools, run the tools in your environment, and interpret the results of these tools. And that will give you an idea of, of how to get your migration planned and start the process.
Yeah, familiarize yourself with the tools. Run it in a test box that you have, just to make sure that you know how to navigate it, how good the information is that it's giving you, and how it is such a useful tool for you to plan. Like Pam said at the beginning, spend more time in the assessment and planning phase rather than tackling unforeseen issues after you disconnect.
Yeah. Also, we will be coming up with some hands-on labs for testing these tools as well. So if you don't have a test environment to roll them out yourself, we'll have some hands-on labs available coming soon, so that you can play with those as well.
Yes, and the last message here is, do look at database compat level as a way to certify, to accelerate your modernization. You can upgrade bits while still not breaking your application, because you know it worked back in 2008 with DB Compat 100. It will work with DB Compat 100 in SQL Server 2017, for example, or Azure SQL Database. So keep that in mind.
Okay, so here are the links that we were talking about. So aka.ms/dbcompat is what Pedro was talking about. We also have some end of service frequently asked questions. That's the first link. So do feel free to download the deck and get these links and review all of the data migration guide and all of the supporting resources.